And welcome everyone to a special edition of Marcus Sims Media. I'm your host, Marcus Sims, and we like to put the spotlight on things that are happening not only in our area, but things that are involved in the music scene, the entertainment scene, the world music scene, and much, much more. Now, I am happy to have a very, very special guest with me on this special Zoom presentation. If you listen to any of our formats on WJAB, you would happen to know that I'm the host of one of our popular shows called Global Grooves, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time on 90.9 WJAB, where the emphasis is on contemporary world music. Well, that being said, one of the shows that's like the gasoline, the wheels, the engine for that show for many, many years has been the music that we receive from Putumayo Records. We're happy to have the founder, the man behind it. We're going to find out much more about his involvement, world music, and much, much more. Please welcome the founder, president of Putumayo Records, Dan Storper. Dan, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you so, so much for joining us. As I said before, I guess almost like a fanboy moment, more or less, because as I've said before, when we put the show together several years ago, we were kind of like in a conundrum what to do with some of this music. As you guys know, you cover everything from around the world. I mean, it's an amazing catalog. I'm saying world music, but then also there's jazz music that you all cover. There's also blues music you all cover. So it's such a huge, wide array, over 150 CDs from the Putumayo catalog. But first and foremost, before I get ahead of myself, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us your origin story.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a little kind of town near New York City. My dad was a lawyer, and I went to college at St. Louis. It was a Latin American studies major, primarily because I had been taken on a trip invited on a trip by my aunt and uncle with their family to visit Mexico and travel and explore Mexico for about a month. And then afterwards spend a month at an archaeological excavation called Teotihuacan outside of Mexico City. And I fell in love with the handicrafts, the culture, especially the indigenous culture of Mexico. And that's when I decided to major in Latin American studies. And then, after 4 years of college, decided to visit the countries that I'd studied. And that began with my first trip to Colombia. And I fell in love there again with the handicrafts of Colombia, and decided that I was going to start a little handicraft importing business, and went around to different areas in Colombia and then down through Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. But I stopped in a little village called Sibundoy in the Putumayo River Valley, southern Colombia, and fell in love with the town. It was one of those absolutely magical days. It was carnival celebrations were beginning. The indigenous people were coming home from the fields to put on their colorful costumes. Andes mountains were in the distance. The greenery was lush. Birds were swirling, and all seemed right with the world. Unfortunately, over the decades, it became a difficult place of kind of drug and rebel activity. So it became, it kind of shows in a way the beauty and the ugly side of life. But I was inspired by that moment in 1975 by the beautiful scene that I was enjoying, and decided to name my company Putumayo. And that's really what happened. Opened a little shop in New York City. I was in the beginning in 75 starting to play some of the music that I was bringing back, Andean records from Bolivia, along with some of my favorite American artists like Van Morrison, Bonnie Raitt, and others. So I mixed it up. And, when I was a kid growing up, I heard a lot of more international music than was available later on. People like Miriam Makeba, Hugh Masekela. So I really grew up Harry Belafonte and this calypso music, Sergio Mendes, Brazil 66. So I was very engaged and appreciative of that kind of those sounds. And started playing that music in my store. But then as I expanded and opened more stores, I lost track of the music in the stores, and really kind of came to a head one day when I was flying back from Indonesia, where we were importing clothing and handicrafts from, and stopped in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And as I was on my way to visit a museum exhibit, a place called the De Young Museum, where someone I knew had curated a textile collection. And I was on my way, I was walking through, kind of ambling through the park, and came across this unforgettable scene. an African band called Katoja was playing in this opening in the field, well, actually in the forest. And there were probably 100 people of different ages and backgrounds, all kind of having this wonderful time dancing to this infectiously upbeat, joyous music. And I was struck by the way the music had brought these people together. And it led me back when I went back to New York, walked into one of my stores, and they were kind of playing thrash metal music. And I said, this is not appropriate. I need to go out and find better music to play, more appropriate music to play, international music to play in the stores. And so that led me to develop a kind of mixtape of international songs that we sent around to the various stores at that time, 7 stores. And the response was just unbelievably positive from our staff who were bopping around to the customers, kept asking about the songs. And by happenstance or luck or something, divine, who knows, but I happened to be a member of a group called the Social Venture Network, which was trying to integrate social responsibility into business, and had members like Ben and Jerry, The Body Shop, Reebok, Patagonia, and Rhino Records. And I'd gotten to know a little bit the owner of Rhino, and I approached him about doing a compilation or 2. And that's kind of the beginning. And he agreed, and we launched the first 2 CDs in collaboration with Rhino back in April of 1993.
Over 20 million copies of Putumayo's releases have been sold. Over 150 CDs have been released. We can hear Putumayo music in movies, TV ads, and also TV shows and ads. But Dan, let me ask you this. For someone, and this may be a loaded question, kind of broad, but for someone who's just joining us right now, what exactly is world music? I know you all cater more than just the quote unquote world music scene. As I said before, there's jazz, there's blues, there's other, but what is world music?
Well, the term world music was created back, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s by some British folks who were trying to kind of create a section in record stores where music from different parts of the world could be presented in some cohesive way or some overarching way. And so that term began to take hold at that point, before I actually started Putumayo as a record label. And it took hold because it just, people couldn't come up with anything better than that to reflect international music. And it's obviously a vast, we say that the world of international music is so vast. It's a vast ocean. And I think what Putumayo's been trying to do over the years is to find ways to curate and select and take people on these musical journeys that, as we say, are guaranteed to make you feel good. And so having a place in a record store, to put the CDs, and in those days, even cassettes as well, was helpful. But it obviously can be wildly difficult when you have a mix of all kinds of sounds. So, when you're dealing with Latin music, it's very different than African music. May come from some similar inspirations, and there's cross-cultural connections. But we use the term world music or international music, or, when we're talking about the jazz and blues and soul that we have put together, especially since I moved to New Orleans, where I live now. The idea is that somehow, it became a marketing term that just got adopted.
What I love about Putumayo Records, also not only the great music, but you guys put recipes in the back of the CDs. You also, a lot of the releases where there are proceeds that go to a lot of charitable organizations as well. What would you say is the overall mission of Putumayo Records?
Well, I think it's similar to what I always was attracted to when I was starting out, which was, in a way, introducing people to other cultures that historically have been depicted for their negative aspects, their poverty, their disease, their political problems, their wars, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea is that you can look at a country like Haiti and you can see only the negatives, or you can see the one of the most wonderful musical cultures there is, and art cultures. And so I think the world is yin yang. There's a lot of ugliness and there's a lot of beauty. And ideally what Putumayo was created what I was interested in was presenting the positive side of these other cultures. And, the music especially is enables people to rise above their daily problems. It's a lot easier that, people didn't have the money for shrinks in, places like Haiti. But, getting boogieing and dancing and having some kind of celebration and way of lifting your spirits through music is I think, key to how people function in the world.
Does it just blow your mind to see that in a time of record labels and the music industry has gone through so many shifts and changes and transitions that you guys have basically been able, in a lot of ways, it seems, to apparently weather the storm that's going on in the music industry?
Well, I think what, I tell people, I've been doing this for a long time. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary at Putumayo, and we were probably the last record label to enter the digital age. So, I was kind of hung up on the physical package, and still, we just released a new CD called Bossa Nova. We released an album called African Yoga in February.
Hmm.
And we did a Linda Ronstadt collection of inspirational songs to her called Feels Like Home, focused on her growing up in the borderlands of southern Arizona back in the fall. But we started a whole digital only series as well. So we now release almost every week either a digital EP, a 5-song EP, or a digital album. We released an album called Acoustic Latino, the first full 10-song digital album. And we have others coming up that are, part of the transition that is going on from, people, using CDs still, but it is definitely evolving in a digital direction. I've decided to embrace it finally after dragging my heels for many years.
Understood. Uh, as a fan, as a longtime fan of Putumayo music, how do you all go about selecting the artists for some of these compilations? How tell us how the selection process goes, like for the Africa Yoga or the latest release of Bossa Nova. How do you all select this music or pick the artists?
Well, I got to give a lot of credit to Jacob Edgar, who's been collaborating with me for about 25 years. He's an ethnomusicologist. He's been head of our research A&R department for many years, for all those years. He started his own label called Kumbansha, but he still consults with us. And he's the guy who essentially maintains our database of about 60,000 songs that I have either, for the most part, listened to and approved for keeping in the database. And then every week he sends me anywhere from 50 to 100 songs to listen to that he finds in his research or gets sent to him. He travels. He's actually a musical host on the National Geographic Lindblad Explorer cruises, and also used to do a TV show called Music Voyager. So I joke that he has the best job at in connection with Putumayo over the years because he gets to focus on music selection. But he also points out, and that's, I think, important, is that he listens to thousands of songs for the work that we're doing, and for any one album, basically he'll be able to provide me with from the database and from new research, instead of me having to listen to thousands of songs, I'm listening generally to hundreds of songs. So I may listen to 300 to 700 songs instead of the potential 5,000 or more
Okay.
for each project. And then, we both do additional research. I find songs on my own. I get songs. I'm specially focused. My particular area, because I live in New Orleans, happens to be very jazz, blues, soul, and kind of American roots, Americana, bluegrass, things like that I have access to being in this area. But yeah, I'm the one who makes the final choices. I create the sequence, which can actually take extremely long. First of all, you can't necessarily license every song. Not every song is licensable. And then once you get all the songs together, you got to really create this, what I call kind of musical journey that's guaranteed to make you feel good. And it's got to flow. And so I could go through 40 to 80 sequences before I'm happy with the flow.
Wow, wow. And I have to also acknowledge I'm on the radio, and also Dan, I'd have to mention, of course, you're co-hosting the Putumayo radio show, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah. Rosalie Howarth, who was the acoustic sunrise host on a rock station, commercial rock station in San Francisco, has been my co-host for many years, and actually she started doing the show by herself. She's no longer with KFOG, but the show was syndicated and is now run on about 100 radio stations. So you can hear it, and on our website, putumayo.com, which, as I mentioned, is spelled Putumayo. So people can find, a lot of material, a lot of video. One thing I do think that's been really enjoyable for me, Jacob also researches music videos that can support and promote the songs that we're putting on our collections. And so we've selected a wonderful array of music videos from around the world. So if someone goes to our website, not only can they, check out all our music, but they can watch videos, listen to the radio show, etc.
And now, Dan, as we're starting to wrap things up, could you, for our listeners right now, could you recommend some artists that they need to check out? Maybe some that have that maybe your top 3 or 4 artists that you want our listeners to check out. Maybe some that I can get on air, or some that they need to add to their playlist.
Well, one thing I would, we just posted a playlist, which we're calling the 30th anniversary Putumayo playlist. And it's actually a link from our homepage on the Putumayo website. And it includes some of my favorite artists of all time, some of whom are no longer living, like Oliver Mtukudzi from Zimbabwe, who's one of my favorites, or Habib Kwate is living, incredible artist from Mali in West Africa. Ricardo Lemvo, originally from kind of the edge of the Congo, now lives in Los Angeles. He was the first artist that we released a full album of, and others that, Brazilian artists like Jorge Ben, old timers. And then there's a lot of new artists that we're finding. And so we call the new digital only series the Discovery Series. And the idea is that we're helping, hopefully, people find artists they never would happen upon otherwise, that unfortunately are not played much, maybe not even in their own countries. So I think the idea, if you look at that list of the Putumayo 30th anniversary playlist that you can see, you can also, it's available on places like Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, and Pandora, places like that. And you can see some of my favorites of all time.
And I have to say, this one of my favorite releases that you all did. It probably is more, the emphasis is more on the contemporary side of things. You all released a CD a while ago called Global Soul, which I really appreciated because it showed you how R&B, neo soul music, but how you got artists from Korea and Germany and Italy who are embracing an R&B neo soul vibe. You've also got your World Party releases where the up tempo, more of a contemporary sound where they're embracing even some elements of hip hop, definitely R&B. So definitely, I really appreciate that. For me, from my standpoint, it's great to hear world music, but it shows you just the influence, how music probably based here in the United States, how it's now gone worldwide, correct?
Yeah, well, I think in the 90s it really expanded, and as you can read also on our homepage at putumayo.com about some of the songs, and one of the songs from Cairo to Casablanca, one of our earlier albums, became a hit in Colombia because a DJ played it in a club, and it helped spark an Arabic music revolution around the world, especially in Latin America. So I think, we've decided in our 30th anniversary year to start recreating some of the old classics and posting them so people can listen on places like Apple Music and Pandora and Spotify and YouTube. So you can find those on the website. But one of the albums that you mentioned, Global Soul, I don't forget putting the albums together. And I remember sitting there and playing. We used to have these listening sessions, and we'd talk about Putumayo because the idea was to not freak people out and go so intense that, I was picking songs because I was a retailer that would be fun to play in a store that would create a musical environment. And so I never kind of wanted to go too far. So when we did albums like Arabic Groove or Arabic Beat, African Beat, some of the earlier albums, Cairo to Casablanca, I was always a little concerned about going too far into the hip hop realm. But I think we tried to find that balance. And so, you know, we're recreating some of those old albums. So look out for Global Soul. We'll be hopefully making that available in the near future.
Awesome. Like I said, one of my favorites. And Dan, once again, congratulations. 30 years of putting out just some of the best music. Where if you look, there has to be, everyone has to be at least, should own at least one Putumayo release. I love the hard copies. I know you guys have went digital, but I like being able to not only, I'm the nerd that also wants to read the bio on the artist. And that's one of the great things about Putumayo release. You also can find out about the artist, about the song, the translations, the whole. Now, I think that's what makes the whole setup just unique with what you guys do.
Well, thank you, Marcus. I mean, I appreciate the fact that in this year of kind of talking to radio stations and realizing, you know, how long people out there in different parts of the U.S. have been playing and appreciating what we've done is really rewarding. And I thank your fans, to those that have supported us over the years, and new ones hopefully will check out Putumayo online. And in any event, it's a pleasure to talk to you today.
And once again, we want to remind everyone, be sure to go to putumayo.com for more information. You can also go to their Facebook page, Instagram page, Twitter page. They're all across social media. 30 years of putting out some incredible, incredible music that I guarantee you, your friends, your family would all enjoy. Dan, thank you so much for giving us a few moments of your time.
Well, thanks, Marcus. Take care. Appreciate it.
Thank you.